we'd like to welcome everybody to another Flameless Fireside tonight. Tonight, we're going to have a very interesting discussion with Steve Greene. Steve Greene, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
How are you?
We're doing good. We're hanging in there. We've also tonight hosting, we have Tara and Monica. They have been on before. So both are great interviewers. Steve, you're in good hands. So, I mean, I could almost just sit back and enjoy the show myself because they'll take good care of you. And they're really good interviewers. So hopefully we'll get to know you a little bit tonight. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the topic at hand. I had the topic right here. And the topic is uplifting ourselves and others versus tearing others down or tearing ourselves down. So it's a good discussion and a good topic. And so let's get to know you. So Steve, where are you from?
I'm from Southern Idaho, born and raised on a 400-acre dairy farm. I've lived my entire life. What's that?
What part?
Cache Valley.
Oh, okay.
The good side, Idaho.
There you go.
The good side.
Born and raised, like I said, I lived my entire life in Cache Valley, except for 6 years that I spent in Iowa because of a woman. I don't. And I spent a summer in California with my sister right out of high school, but I don't count that because I know I was going back home. It was just a 3-month visit.
Hopefully, at least you had some really good sweet corn while you were in Iowa, because
I had good sweet corn in Iowa. I have good sweet corn here in Cache Valley. Iowa has its beauties. It doesn't replace my mountains.
Oh yeah, mountains that's like one thing in the Midwest. I'm like, you have no mountains.
Yeah, I've actually had long discussions with people and they're like, why wouldn't you ever live in Texas? Sorry for you who live in Texas, but it's flat. And then I went to Florida once and I'm like, there's no hills here, not even a hill. It's flatter than flat. So I miss mountains. I go places where there's no mountains and it just drives me crazy. So
if I didn't have Lake Michigan, like I would go nuts. Like I need something that's big and natural. Where I am. So
yeah, I was in I mean, even in California, you know, the mountains are huge in California, right? The Sierras. I mean, I was born in Reno, up by the Sierra Mountains in Tahoe. I always had big, giant mountains around me to look up at. And so, you know, I grew up in California and, you know, I did a 3-year stint in Salt Lake looking at the big, giant mountains. Back home in California, we have the Santa Monica Mountain Range. We've got the, you know, Sierra Madres behind us. It's awesome. It's just huge. Mountains galore.
I grew up in a ski town in the Colorado Rockies. So,
yep.
See,
I get it.
The other side of those Rockies, on the Utah side, Idaho side.
That's true.
So they are my mountains. For my ex-wife to finally convince me that Iowa is not flat, it is mountainless. And that after a year and a half, she finally convinced me that, okay, so it is not flat. Compared to Idaho, it's flat.
Wow, yeah.
But I spent most of my life either farming or working in agriculture or manufacturing. Currently, I am working at Procter & Gamble, except I'm on short-term disability because I had a brain issue that they had to fix.
Okay, that's not good.
Utah.
Well, that's not good.
No, but everything's going well. I'm going to take my glasses off, and if people have questions, you guys are going to have to read them, so I can't read the bottom, but I'd rather be able to see your faces. So.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
No, that's fine. We'll bring up stuff from the chat that are good questions to ask. Yeah.
I'm 50 years old, been married twice. The way I see it, I got 6 kids. I'll leave it up to everybody else to decide what they want to think. If that comes up and you guys.
Well, I'm sure second marriages, you become responsible for some kids. And so you feel close to them.
I have 6 kids. Like I said, we have 2 together. we buried my baby girl, which was the first of our two together. Freak car accident.
Oh, wow.
My first wife, I raised her kids from the time they were 3 and 5 till they
Oh,
were
yeah.
teenagers.
So your dad, you're a dad then.
Yeah.
They both disowned me when we got the divorce. They bought into their mom's lies. My son has finally decided that he's tired of being mad at me, so we're rebuilding a relationship there.
Well, that's good.
And my second wife had 2 kids that were mostly adults when we got together, and they don't consider me any part of their life, but I am. They're my kids. I might not be their dad, but they're my kids.
Yeah, that's always weird when you're adults. Like my parents remarried when I was already an adult, so it was kind of weird. It was, I wasn't really looking at this guy as my stepdad, but just more my mom's husband. It was just kind of different.
Yeah, I don't believe in steps. The only steps I have lead up to my house. So like I says, I might not be their dad, but they're my kids.
Yeah.
They're not my step kids. They're my kids.
Yeah.
So
That's a good attitude to have.
Yeah, for sure.
So do you see all of them now, or is the one kid you still don't talk to, right? For one son, that's the one that's actually biologically mine. I see him very regular. This last year, I've been rebuilding a relationship with my son from my first marriage. The other 3 I have no contact with. Oh, okay.
So
I'm sorry, that's too bad.
That's why
hard.
Bio. It's complicated.
It always is.
It always is.
I think everything is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's especially when we're LDS, because sometimes I it's kind of weird. Sometimes I can put my brain, like, think what it would be like if I wasn't a member of the church, and sometimes I think, wow, if I wasn't a member of the church, I could just live with somebody and not have to worry about like being married, and then kids are upset, and I could just be somebody's boyfriend for the rest of my life. But then you think, yeah, but that's not happiness, right? So I bring my brain back to like church life, and I'm like, yeah, church life's way better. But it just seems like, it is difficult. It is difficult to make these relationships work when you're trying to blend families.
Even at that, could you live with them and the kids be okay with it, or with the kids?
Oh no, yeah, that'd be hard too. But
yeah.
So it's complicated. It's complicated, but
all the way around.
Look at it.
Yeah, it's always, and like I don't know, like I just met my dad. So my dad's 76 and he's getting married this fall. Like I just met his fiance this summer, which is like, that's also kind of a strange, right? Like I'm divorced, I have kids of my own, and like meeting, anyway, she's delightful. So my dad is marrying his high school sweetheart, which is really,
that's interesting.
yeah, it's really cool. It's a neat story. So, but it's like totally changes the dynamic of like how old kids are and how they think of things and what the relationships can be. And anyway, it's an interesting topic.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So Steve, are you dating anybody?
I am dating a little bit.
Yeah.
In fact, her name is Sherry. I think she's on this podcast.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
She knows that I'm a long ways from any kind of a relationship, because I've still got a lot of healing to do, figuring out. Because
sounds like a patient woman.
I hope so. I hope she doesn't get. I keep telling her, I say, you know what, you're going to get tired of waiting and move on to somebody else. She said, oh no, I'm not.
Well, then
And
she
you're
likes
like, are you
you.
sure?
But I don't believe in jumping out and jumping back in. I was single for 12 years.
Wow.
Between my second, I've been married, I'm single now for 2 years, but a year and a half to 2 years, but that's been a complicated year and a half.
Yeah, I can imagine.
My parents are both older, and we had some health issues I was dealing with my mother and my father. But that's one thing I was going to say a little bit earlier, and it's kind of comical. When I got divorced the second time, I said I've been married twice. I'm not doing it a third time. in
But I
part,
heard the third time's a charm, right? That's a
in part,
phrase.
fully
right?
understand the fact that, you know what, I've got to heal me before I can do anything else. Well, we lost my mom in December, and Dad's like, if I find the right person, I'm getting married. If I have to be here very much longer, I don't want to be alone. It sucks. I said, the only being alone is being with the wrong person.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you don't want to be with the wrong person. And that's, I think we're all in that same boat. I think we're all concerned, especially if you're married twice, because you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going for a third try here. It could be a little unnerving.
Yep.
Yep. And it's,
Well,
I
I
think
don't
it's
know about-
interesting. Oh, go ahead, Tara.
You know what? Like I feel like I'm perfectly fine being single now, but I can't imagine me being single forever and ever. Like I don't want to be 80 and alone, you know. So I guess I need to start looking now.
Well, I don't expect to live till I'm 80.
Oh,
I didn't expect to live
wow.
like either of those. So
I have visions of me being 125. So I don't know. Just
I really want to know what you envision yourself being like, Corey, at 125. Like, how much have you shrunk? Right? Like, how
I'm
wrinkly
gonna look
are
like
you?
a giant baby.
Benjamin Buttonish. That's funny. Well, and something else I thought about when you were talking about like healing yourself, Steve, like that's a topic that I always find really fascinating, because it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, we all need to heal ourselves to the point that we can have like a functional, healthy relationship with someone else. But there are certain ways in which like some stuff doesn't heal, right? Until you're like in a healthy relationship, or some stuff doesn't heal until you kind of get to a different point. It's so that's an interesting one too, is like,
well, that's why we are dating some, and
yeah,
I'm hibernating all by myself, hiding in a hole.
yeah,
But you do have to have other people to heal, but you've also got to be able to sit down. And I'm struggling with this second marriage, the way it came apart. With my first one, we were together for 14 years, raised 4 kids. Well, raised 3 kids because we buried the one.
right.
My son was like 8 when we got divorced. The other 2 were both teenage. One was an adult and the other one was a senior in high school, I think, if I remember right. But you sit back and you go, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what I did wrong. This is what she did wrong. This is what she thinks I did wrong, and how I can understand why she thinks that. You got to be able to understand where they're coming from and own what is yours and make sure and give them what is theirs. Well, the way my second marriage fell apart, we never had, apparently, with 6 years of marriage, we didn't have a good marriage at all in her mind.
Right.
So I'm sitting here trying to go, okay, we did this and this and this together. Was it a good time or was it not? So I don't know what's real and what's not. So I've got to go sit back and assess and figure all that crap out.
Yeah.
so there was a talk that I listened to, and it really resonated with me. And I mean, I've been perfectly fine being single, and I could totally envision myself being single forever. I've been happy, I've been good, but it was about how growth is never comfortable, and the Lord has decided that we need to grow and we need to stretch ourselves out. We need to take chances, and we need to have a partner to do that with. And so, as comfortable as I am in my little bubble, you know, that's not the way the Lord intended. And I think that sometimes that's really hard, because it seems so much easier just to stay where you're at and just keep moving along without any heartache, any drama. But that's really, not the way the Lord intended.
Right. And like I said, I tell people I'm not doing it a third time, with full understanding that I probably will.
Yeah.
If I live to be 80, I will probably have a third wife.
I kind of think sometimes too, we jinx ourselves with the things we say, right? Like when I got married the first time, I was like, hallelujah, I'll never have to date again. And yet, voila, here I am, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I thought the same thing too. I thought everything was settled, and while I was married, and I always had that forward thinking, kind of futuristic thinking, like, oh, what's it going to be like when I'm a grandpa? What's it going to be like Christmas morning when the grandkids come over? What's it going to be like when I'm, 80 years old? Am I going to be that cute couple at church that everybody loves? Like, I was always having these visions of me and my wife in the future. And then I just never knew that it was going to get blown up, and that, that was out of my control. Like I wasn't anything that I could do to stop, the destruction. And,
Yep.
that's what's distressing, I think, for a lot of us that went through, a real painful, like hurtful divorce, where there's a lot of heartache and a lot of broken hearts and a lot of betrayal. And so you lose trust and you lose all that stuff that you had before. You kind of lose, and then you get nervous about, man, oh man, do I want to get stuck in another relationship where I'm, going to go through that again?
Yeah,
It's tough.
for sure. Yeah, it's very tough. And like no one enters a marriage being like, oh, hey, this is going to end. Right? Like it just doesn't work that way.
Well, unless you're, when you're signing that prenup, it's kind of on the mind.
Well, and even then, sometimes I think it's not so much about like expecting it to end as just kind of being practical about people or relationships. It was kind of funny. Like my dad has actually urged his future wife to get a prenup.
Yeah.
Because he was like, I want you to know that like I'm doing this because I care about you and not for any other reason. And like, so there could be multiple reasons for it, right?
Yeah.
I actually had aspirations at one point to be an attorney, and I was going to be a divorce attorney. I was going to save the world divorce at a time.
That would be terrible.
But then I decided the world didn't want to be saved.
I could be a divorce attorney. Oh.
People have too much fun hating the people that they're supposed to be loving. But one of the things I was going to do is give free marriage consultations to couples and have them do prenuptial agreements. When they're kids, it would be a different prenuptial agreement. It would be okay, tell us what your expectations in 5, 10, 15 years are. You do these independently, and then we'll get together and talk about it and make sure you're both on the same page going into this when you think you like each other rather than when you're mad at each other. And, well, we don't have that 5-acre house. No, we don't have 7 kids. Yeah, well, I never wanted 7 kids. So, so it's kind of that when you're dating, especially when you're younger dating, you don't think of the reality of both sides are thinking, oh, hey, we're going to get married. We're going to be live happily ever after for the next 80 years. And you don't think about what your true goals are and what their true goals are.
Yeah.
Do you live on 5 acres? Do you want to live in the city? Do you want to live on 1,000 acres? What do you want to do? Can you live on 1,000 a year? You need 100,000 a year.
There's different thoughts. There's different thought processes when it comes to marriage. Like I got married at 22. So I was like 6 months for my 23rd birthday. Right. So I was young and my wife was young. She was 20. And so it was, we were really, really young. Right. And we were both broke. We had nothing to our names. So everything we built together, I mean, to sign a prenup to say, yeah, you keep the nothing that you have and I'll keep the nothing that I have. Like there was no prenup when you're 22 years old. Right. So
yeah,
we built our lives together. And that there's the other school of thought was you get your careers, you get your assets, you get your finances in order, and then you get married later on in life. I think then that's where you have to probably bring in the prenuptial agreements. But yeah.
But back to that first prenup, it's a different type of prenup. But when you got married at 22, did you want 1 kid and her want 6? Did you both want?
We didn't. We were just playing it by ear. I mean, in fact,
right.
We had a honeymoon baby. And then 3 years later, we had another one.
Your mind, you know what you want, but you don't know what the other person wants. So you don't know if you're even compatible.
Well, but there are certain ways too in which it can change, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like my ex-husband and I both wanted close to the same amount of kids when we got married. I mean, I think ideally he wanted 4, I wanted 6, but I was like 4 is good. Like I'm happy with that. But once we had kids, he was like, no, like we're good. 1's good. Like it totally, because there are certain things where like, until you have the experience, you just don't know. And so sometimes I'm like, I don't even know, like if compatibility is really about like how many kids you're going to have, if it as so much as it is about like, well, how are you with kids? Like, do you like being around them? Is it exhausting for you? Do you like, right? Like more about like those core personality things that kind of affect our decisions about thinking about like what we want in our future life, as opposed to like kind of the list of like, these are the things that I want. Like, do you want a big house because it's, you like having the space, or is it because you feel that helps you feel important, or is it like there's all of these things that are kind of in the background of those types of decisions and things that we want. And I think those background things are much more important in terms of relationship compatibility than what we actually say we want, right?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I don't know.
I think core values are really important because people change. I mean, as my wife and I, we were married at the time, we were growing together. I mean, she was going from her 20s to her 30s to her 40s, right? And I was going from my 20s, going through school, then getting a career, and I was changing, and we were also learning to be parents together at the very, very same time, raising kids, and it was just I look back and I'm barring all the poor mistakes and decisions that she made. I mean, we had a good family and we raised some really good boys, and we were good partners. It was just that she just had some difficulties behaving and acting normal in some situations. So
Yep.
I think lifestyle too, I know with my ex-husband, I was kind of enamored by his life and our lifestyles didn't really match up. He was a city boy. I was an old farm girl, used to working really hard. He was kind of, silver spoon fed. So I think that there's a lot of, just how you're raised and what your lifestyle is like too, that a lot of times we forget when we enter into a marriage. It's a lot more than just attraction.
Well, and I think that's what happened with my second marriage in part, because she worked remotely, so she did a lot of traveling for her work. And so it was great to be able to travel, but then the realization that in order for me to contribute, I have to have a job too. And so having the time to travel with her, and she liked being gone, but she didn't like it that I wasn't gone with her, and she didn't like it that I was, when I didn't have a job and traveled with her a little bit. Like I said, it's a whole problem, but I think that came down to the whole different lifestyle. Is I grew up on a farm working from before sun up till after sundown, and then going in and doing your homework afterwards. But
yeah, well, that's what's so hard. I mean, I think everybody here in the podcast, and in the audience, and even us hosts, I mean, we're at the point where we're trying to meet somebody, and sometimes that comes down to like long distance, and that's always difficult too, because I don't feel like I really get to know the person. Like, I don't get to see them get frustrated about stuff, or I don't get to see them like sitting next to me, after eating pasta and their stomach's upset and they're like, oh, I don't feel very good and don't really want to watch a movie right now. And how do they handle that? And then how do I handle that? Like, let me get you some Alka-Seltzer, or let me run down to CVS for you or something. You don't have those types of things because, everything you do is remote. And
right.
Hopefully not everything, right? Like, hopefully you're meeting in person at some point.
Hopefully you're doing that. Yeah.
But yeah.
Again, every time you meet, it's a honeymoon.
Well, yeah, but that also, like, I think that can happen just when you're dating in person too, right? Like, depending on like how someone presents themselves, how they kind of go about dating. I tend to be very just me when I date, but I've definitely dated people who are not, right? And so it can kind of be, there can kind of be a lot of that going on either way, like where we're just not getting the full picture of who someone is.
Yeah, I think so. We had a whole podcast on like personality tests. I don't know if you've ever done one of those, Steve, or if you.
I've done several.
On that podcast.
I don't remember if I was on that podcast, but I've done several different personality tests. I've done a few psyche evals.
Psyche evals. That's an interesting one. On yourself or the people you were dating?
No, my psychologist did one on me after my first divorce.
Okay, that's good.
Because I'm a very giving person, or I like to think I am. and I like to help other people.
Yeah.
Well, my first ex made accusations about being a narcissist. And I went to my doctor or my psychologist, and I says, okay, so is there any truth to this? And I've been divorced like 4 months. And so he had me do the test. And after the test, we went in. He says, you know what? If I hadn't been seeing you, I've been in therapy for the most part since I buried my baby girl at like 27, off and on. And he goes, if I didn't know you, I would say you were borderline narcissist. And knowing you and knowing everything, you're coming out of a relationship. You're right now figuring out where your feet are. You have a lot of love to give and nobody to give it to, so you're going to give it to yourself. So we redid it a year later and found out I'm completely normal. He also said the fact that I would walk in and ask him if I was a narcissist is the first indication to him that no, you're not.
Yeah, that's usually like a big indicator, right? Like generally people with BPD and narcissistic personality disorder aren't going around asking like if they have it, right?
Oh no,
because
they
that
lose
like
their mind if you call them that.
yeah, I mean that's one of the characteristics of like the disorder is that they can't accept that they have a problem, right? That there's anything wrong. It's so hard. Those disorders are so hard. So yeah, for sure. I also feel like it's something that people throw around a lot without really knowing what it is. And sometimes like legitimately are using it, but sometimes kind of use it to describe other behaviors that are not borderline or narcissistic, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the clinical. Yeah.
I think we have a lot of those issues with a lot of different diseases.
Yeah.
People that suffer from actual depression, which yes, depression is a big problem. But just because I have a bad day doesn't mean I suffer from depression.
Yeah.
Just because I feel bad doesn't mean I'm depressed.
Mm-hmm.
People get hung up in the whole concept of depression, bullying. We don't identify any of those because so they get abused to the point that the ones that really need the help can't get the help because nobody believes.
Yeah, I think we all go through bouts of depression and sadness in our lives. It's people just don't understand that when it's a chronic problem, you cannot help yourself out of it. There's nothing you can do to get out of that rut when it becomes a problem. I think, like you said, Steve, yeah, I think people throw around depression all the time. Oh, you must be depressed, Corey. I'm like, yeah, today I am, but yesterday I wasn't. Tomorrow I won't be. But today I'm not feeling too good, right? So we all go through bouts of it. It doesn't mean that we suffer from depression. I think people who suffer from it are chronic at it. They're suffering for days and days on end. They can't get out of bed. It affects their jobs, their friends, their family. There's a difference than just throwing out the word.
Right. But the word gets
sure.
out much that those people have a lot harder time getting the help they need because of the ones that abuse it, for lack of a better word.
I mean, it kind of, in some ways, it kind of goes into the topic in a really good way, I think, in terms of like either people kind of taking on labels for themselves that might not necessarily be accurate, right? Or putting labels on others that might not be accurate, because those types of labels and responses, like usually, like in my experience, when I've seen people who are like calling other people narcissists and they don't really know what narcissism is, it's usually in a sense of trying to like make themselves like look better in terms of like in comparison to the other person. Like it's a way of like propping yourself up or like bringing the other person down, or various types of labels that we put on ourselves can be making like feeling like we're not good enough, right? Which then can be kind of making ourselves look like victims, because we don't know how to healthily get the support that we need. Like there's a lot of ways in which that whole thing can play into tearing others and tearing ourselves down in unhealthy ways, as opposed to like a diagnosis that's really aimed at like helping someone heal, right? Helping them be better, helping them have healthy relationships, helping them feel like they belong, in the world and in life, and that they have something to offer. Like that's a totally different thing, right? From excusing our own behavior or the behavior of others.
And a lot of times, and I think Corey would agree with me on this, based on his ex-wife too, is I get kind of annoyed when I hear people throw those terms around a lot, because when you've lived with somebody or been in a relationship with somebody that's like that, you don't escape that unscathed. It changes you too. I was talking to a friend the other day. It's almost like Stockholm syndrome. Once you've had to live with somebody like that and been under that kind of mind game and control, it almost bothers me when people throw it around very flippantly, because it really does. It damages everybody, and it changes them.
Well, it dilutes the problem. It dilutes the problem from the people who. So then you're looking at everybody who might have one of the symptoms. Like if you look at the traits of like BPD or narcissism, all of a sudden you're identifying one trait and you're going, oh, that Corey's got it. Corey's got BPD because, that one trait he just exhibited just now. The thing is that we all, like I said, we all exhibit depression in our lives periodically. We all exhibit times of narcissism. We all exhibit borderline personality. We have those tendencies. It doesn't mean that it's a chronic problem within us. So I may not be BPD or narcissistic because maybe one morning I feel a little narcissistic and I'm like, man, I'm feeling pretty awesome today. I'm looking good. Everything's working out for me. The world's not against me. I feel awesome. And maybe that is a tendency to be a little narcissist that day, but it doesn't mean I'm going to do that every single day. Right.
But people feel that way because with how you treat them.
True. Yeah.
So,
but I don't even think
you have to be really careful too with labeling, especially men, as narcissists. I would hope that most men are narcissistic in a way because they need to protect, they need to provide. I mean, you
need to be competitive and aggressive and going out and getting it. And that's what narcissists do really, really well. I mean, that's why most politicians are narcissists. Most presidents of the United States were narcissists. Most CEOs are narcissists because they're go-getters and they step on people to get there. And they have to have no qualms about it.
I mean, I think it's important to distinguish between narcissism and confidence.
True, exactly.
Because narcissism, like when you're talking about narcissism as like a mental condition, that's not just like, I mean, maybe somebody is a psychopath and they don't care about other people. So they step on them to get where they're going. But narcissism actually comes from a place of deep insecurity.
Yep.
And that's different from being somebody who's like, I feel good today. I feel confident. Like most narcissists don't wake up feeling good and confident. Right. And that is what kind of creates the behaviors that they have. And it's true with borderline and narcissism are actually very, very closely related. And it comes from a fear of not being good enough, a fear of abandonment, an unwillingness to take accountability for your actions because that would just make you like worthless. And so you totally put blame on other people all the time. And generally it's not because you think you're awesome. Yeah. Right. You do want all of the attention. You like being the center of attention, but like, it's because you're so insecure about yourself. So I think it's really important to like distinguish that because I would say there are a lot of people who are very confident and some of them very arrogant and some of them who have like personality traits that are not really leaning towards empathy, who have a lot of success. But even in those cases, they're not necessarily narcissists.
No.
Right.
But I mean, you can tell which ones are like the successful ones and you see them out there because of their actions. Like, I mean, I guess I'm a little more sensitive because I lived with a BPD for so long, for 22 years that now looking back, I'm going, wow, I see all the behaviors now that I know what it is. I didn't know what I was looking at before. Before I thought, like Monica said, I'm like, everything was my fault. Like they didn't take responsibility for any of their actions. And so therefore I walked the line of constantly apologizing, constantly taking blame, constantly reassessing myself. We get in big fights. I'd go back and then I'd sit and meditate on myself. Like, what did I do wrong? And what am I doing wrong? And is it what can I not see that I'm doing that's driving her crazy? And I always was constantly looking at myself as the one who was doing wrong. So you're right. I mean, but I think but people throw those terms out a lot. Like Too
they
much.
they throw it out a lot, not knowing what it means, right? So like with your
Exactly.
ex-wife, because like my mom has borderline, my sister has borderline, like there's a lot of borderline going around in my family. And Corey, I think you're right. Like you feel that way as the person who's receiving it, right? Like, what am I doing wrong? And you want this person to be happy. But like from them, it comes from a deep wound within themselves that they can't heal, and they're looking for other people to heal it. And it's never going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so, but they can't face the wound in themselves because it just makes them feel too worthless. Like it feels like overwhelmingly, right?
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of people who end up with borderline also like commit suicide, and right, because it's like such
Yeah.
anyway. So yeah, so that's one of the issues I have with people throwing around like narcissism as like a label for people, because I'm like, unless somebody's been diagnosed, or like you've really, really good, like you've been with a really good therapist who's been able to say like, hey, it sounds like the person you were with like really demonstrates some of these traits of these personality disorders, then we have to be really careful to not label someone, right?
And
as
getting a true
narcissist or
diagnosis is
BPD.
very difficult to get a
It's
diagnosis.
very
because-
difficult, but you have to like, you shouldn't be doing it yourself, right? You shouldn't be like, oh yeah, this
No.
person was totally a narcissist. Like this is something that you should be working with professionals to kind of figure that stuff
Yeah.
out.
Exactly.
That's
Like what?
so hard is because they're not willing to work with the professionals.
No.
So-
they're
Oh
not.
That's just
no.
it, yeah.
It's
So
difficult.
you're working with a professional to make the diagnosis without the person. So they're only hearing your side, which is their
Well,
job.
it's the tail that wags the dog.
Fine.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's the tail that wags the dog. So you have to make everything seem like it's their idea, and that they are voluntarily going through the process. So like where we went through marriage counseling together, it was, we tried to work on our marriage through marriage counseling, but it was always one-sided. Like she was telling the counselor to fix me. Like,
Yeah.
it's me, it's Corey, he did this, Corey drives me crazy, Corey's this, he's not caring, he doesn't love me, he doesn't show love, he's inaffectionate.
And like,
Like,
good
all these
therapists see
things.
that and they're like,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
huh. Like my mom would do this thing where she would meet with a therapist until the therapist figured her out.
Yep.
And then she would switch to
Oh,
someone
yeah.
else, right? Like as soon as the therapist kind of was like, let's look at you,
Yeah.
right? Then it was like, nope.
Yeah.
go to a
She
different
fired our
therapist.
first therapist, and then the therapist was really good, and she actually does work with borderline women. Like she's like, I'm one of the few counselors that want to do it, because most therapists won't do it.
Most therapists won't do it because it's so much work.
It's
and
so much work, but it's also a lot of threat.
Yeah, it's a threat. It's also like yeah, there's all sorts of stuff going on with it that
Borderlines
a
will
lot
go,
of
if you cross a borderline, and especially a therapist, when they have so much trust in the therapist that they feel like the therapist crosses them, that they will go after their license. They will do all they can. They will make up lies, and they will do everything they can to destroy the therapist. So most therapists will not even work with borderlines. It's that dangerous.
Yeah.
Very too happy. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same with any relationships that they're in, right? Like they'll do whatever they can to destroy the people who they see as a threat to them, even when they're people that they supposedly love.
Oh yeah,
right?
that's why it's like, I hate you, don't leave me, right?
Yeah. So sad.
But so going back to uplifting ourselves and others. So how do you do that, Steve? How do you uplift yourself and others? Like, what is your favorite thing to do?
I wake up in the morning and I go to the Lord. And I ask the Lord, I say, okay, it's morning, I'm awake. Who can I serve today? I don't give him specifics, because then it's me trying to tell him what to do. Put somebody in my path that I can serve today. And then at the end of the day, I sit down and I think, okay, who did I serve? And it has me looking at it has me finding the ways that he's using me, instead of looking for, well, why am I not seeing any miracles? I think I commented on this podcast before that if you're having problems seeing the miracle, become the miracle.
Yeah.
Kind of took a lot different turn when they actually came up with the topic, because the way I had it, when I put it in there, part of the discussion is the fact that we talk about, in trying to build people up, we tell people, well, nobody's perfect. If we believe our religion,
That's not true. Anybody that dies under the age of 8 is perfect, according to the religion. When you're baptized, for that instant, when you go in the water, if you truly believe our religion, that out of the water, you're perfect. That might only last for half a second till you get out of the water. It might not even last the confirmation. But when we walk around saying, well, nobody's perfect, it gives us excuses for what we do. If we partake of the sacrament, if you're truly trying to do what you're supposed to do and trying to make everything right and believe in the sacrament reminds us of the atonement. Every time you partake of the sacrament, you're right back at that ground zero perfect. So we're tearing people down by making the excuse that nobody's perfect. We're all far from perfect. And we all do it. Don't get me wrong. I've done it myself.
Yeah, I think I think I know where you're coming from. For me, I kind of do the similar thing where I try to leave myself open to receive inspiration.
Yeah.
Steve,
For
I think
example-
the coolest thing about you that I've always noticed about you is that I love the way that you look at the gospel and at life. I mean, your approach to things is so just spot on and simplistic. And I think more people should think like you. I've always been impressed with like, you're just very, it is how it is. You don't see a lot of gray. And I think a lot of us do. I don't think you've been I don't think you let life taint you so much. And I don't know. I think that's cool. I love that about you. I think it's cool.
And here I am, like the nuanced person. I'm like, gray doesn't have to be bad.
No.
Like gray doesn't have to be like, I don't know. I mean, I think we need both perspectives, right? But it was kind of interesting because even when Steve was making his last point, I was thinking about like, well, that's interesting because I think it depends on people and the different ways in which they're motivated. Because like for me, like the nobody's perfect is never an excuse for bad behavior. It's like an empathetic acknowledgement of kind of like where we are and what we're all struggling to be and that we can get better. Like it's a promise that there's growth to be had, right? So like when I look at people not being perfect, I say, wow, like what a cool opportunity for growth. But there are some people who would like use it as an excuse, right? To kind of do whatever. But it totally depends on like your personality, how you see things, what motivates you, why you're saying the thing that you're saying, right? Like I think it kind of goes back to like what I was saying earlier about like when people are calling out diagnoses, like why you're doing it is really the important part, right? Like if you're saying nobody's perfect because you want an out, like that reason is like much more of a problem in my view than like saying the words, right? So
But if you're saying somebody else an out also, like I said, it's a fine line. And no, we shouldn't be tearing people down by saying, oh, well, you did this and this and this wrong. But if you're saying, oh, well, you know what? That's okay. Nobody's perfect. Okay, well, what I just did wrong, this fight that I just got in that was 100% my fault is okay because nobody's perfect. Where is that holding me accountable for my actions?
Well, I think though, can it also be seen as like an invitation to repentance and like an acknowledgement of, I mean, because I think I could see some people like that being really like discouraging, right? Too. Like some people, yeah, for sure, they would look at it and be like, oh yeah, it's fine that I did this. But I think some people don't have, I think it just depends on the person. Like I remember being with, meeting with my therapist once when I was trying to decide like whether or not to get divorced, which is like, it was a long time that I was meeting with him to kind of try to figure this out. And I really wanted my marriage to work. And at one point I was just like, I have this fear, like, what if this is a sin? What if this is a mistake? What if I'm screwing up? Like, what if this isn't the right choice? And my therapist was LDS, right? But he said to me, he was just like, well, maybe it is. Maybe it's not. He's like, maybe it is. But that's what the atonement is there for. And it was really interesting because I think some people would say, oh, well, that's like saying nobody's perfect or that's giving you an out. And it wasn't, he wasn't saying like, oh, well, go and sin and do whatever you want. And that's what the atonement's there for. He's saying you do the best that you can. And the atonement is there to heal and to uplift and to help you grow. And if you make a choice thinking that it's the best choice, really believing that you're doing the right thing, and it turns out it's not the right thing, that there's hope for you, right?
Yep. There was a conference talk a few years ago where the General Authority came on. I think it was Brother Uchtdorf or trying to remember who it was, but excuse me. And he talked about how he's like, when you fall down, he's like, when you make a mistake, he's like, start over. And he was saying this to people who were inactive. He was saying this to members of the church who said, you know what? I keep screwing up. I might as well not go to church anymore. I keep screwing up. I don't deserve to be a member of the church. And that talk was directed to them because he started off the talk. I don't know if you remember, he's inviting all those to come back to church. All of those who are inactive, who haven't been to church in a while, come back. And I think his idea was, and his whole talk and his whole mindset was, keep trying. Keep trying. You're going to make mistakes, but keep trying. And, you know, I got to thinking about that. Like, here's somebody who's probably struggling with smoking or probably struggling with drinking or struggling with something. And they're just like, I give up. And he's telling them not to give up. And that's what's great, you know, because I've had friends who told me their grandfathers told me, like, they want that sacrament meeting should smell like coffee and cigarettes. Because all the people who are struggling, all of you who are struggling should be there, right? Except though, some members of the church, we judge. We're like, oh, that brother smells like smoke, or oh, that brother smells like coffee, or that brother has tattoos on. Well, you know what? Who cares? That makes me really upset when I hear people comment about tattoos. Like, you don't realize we're a convert church. Somebody might have gotten tattoos and then joined the church 2 years ago, and then you're judging them and like, well, you're not a very good member of the church. You have tattoos. Yeah, they got them 20 years ago. They became a convert 2 years ago.
Well, and even that, like, there are cultural things where it's fine in the church. Like tattoos was like a standard, right? That kind of came out at a very particular time. And like, I don't even think it's a big deal if people get a tattoo.
It's not, if it's not in the temple recommend
as a member, right? Like,
look at it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You see, everybody needs to come to church in Chicago. We're like, great, you do crack? Fantastic. Come be with us. We're excited to have you.
What? You want to wear blue jeans and a t-shirt? Come on in, sit next to me.
Yeah, like, come on in, and nobody, is gonna judge you. Because I agree with you, Corey. I think that's like a huge problem, is the judgment. Whereas like good people, I remember hearing a talk once where this member of my ward gave a really great talk on repentance, and he was just like, good people repent. Like, if you're not repenting, like, you're not doing it right? He was like, good people repent because those are the people who are trying to be better. Like, they're trying to improve, they're trying to like reconcile, right? And I just thought that was like a really cool way to think about it, because I think a lot of times in the church people are like, oh, I'm so bad, I have to repent. And it's like, no, like, that's what saints do. Like, that's what we do. Right?
I also think that a lot of times we don't know the backstory. My oldest son, I never tell this to members, so I'm telling it to all of you guys, but my oldest son got a tattoo when he was 17, and I'm the one who took him to get it, and I'm the one who asked him to get it. He's a type 1 diabetic, never wore his jewelry or anything he was supposed to. So we got a big circle tattooed right there, and it says type 1 on it. He'd always wanted a tattoo, and I said, as long as it shows you're diabetic, let's do it. And, a lot of people were really judgmental towards me, but I just wanted him to be safe, So, a lot of times we don't know the reasons that people do that.
If it's not in a temple recommend interview, if you can go to a temple recommend interview and answer the questions and get a temple recommend, then you're worthy. And I don't remember them asking if you have tattoos or not. So I just, it's just, I don't know. I've had really good bishops in the past that said they were putting ashtrays outside for those who were struggling with smoking. Come to church. We'll have ashtrays outside for you, and outside the parking lot. You can go out between meetings and have a smoke, but come to church. I mean, that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be like, well, once you get your act together, we'll see you at church.
Yep. But it should also be one of those things, and Like I said, I made my disclaimer in my bio halfway through. I'm a 12 color crayon box. I can only color in my coloring book. So if you can go to church in jeans and a t-shirt because that's the best you have, by all means, go to church.
Yes, and we're talking about bad habits, and I'm drinking something that looks like a beer. So it is ginger beer. It's ginger. It's not
Sure,
alcoholic.
Corey. Sure. We believe you. I don't know.
What are you drinking?
Like-
Vodka there, Monica?
No.
If you,
Pepsi.
Pepsi. Nice.
Which, according to some members, is totally off limits. So I'm just going to say I clearly am okay with drinking caffeinated soda.
Well, you know, it's funny. I think Brother Uchtdorf got up and said he liked Dr. Pepper. So I think it was his way of kind of telling the church, like, guys, you can drink Dr. Pepper. Stop it.
Well, they'd actually been writing like letters to different parts of the church for a long time, being like, you guys, it's okay to drink Coke, like trying to get people to learn that it was like okay and to quit, and mostly to quit like berating others for it, right? Which I think is what you were talking about earlier, Corey. And yeah.
Well, it's funny because Joseph Smith, I mean, one thing I like about Joseph Smith is that he really, like, he was kind of the guy. If you read a lot about his stories about how he did things, like he rubbed people the wrong way because he was very, very straightforward guy. Like he didn't beat around the bush. Like he would tell you the way it was, and he would tell you to knock it off. And if you didn't knock it off right away, he'd probably get in a fist fight with you because he was always getting in fist fights. So there was a lot of people that didn't like Joseph Smith because he was just so brash. And there was even a time where, you know, he was sitting down and having a Bible study with another preacher, and he asked the preacher to give the closing prayer. And the preacher did at the time, he did this big, boisterous, loud prayer. And when they were done, Joseph Smith looked at him and he says, you don't need to pray like a jackass to be heard of the Lord. And that guy got real upset and left. But he's trying to tell people, like, he's trying to break down these old traditions, like you don't have to do. And I think the church is trying to do that now. There's so many cultural traditions the church is trying to break down. You know, in fact, when the European saints came over, they wanted to put candles at the table, you know, at the sacrament table. And even after World War II, some of the European saints wanted to put candles at the sacrament table, and the church was like, no, we don't do that. That's these traditions from these other churches. And so we have to be able to stand up and break down these cultural things that we try to put into church, you know, like, oh, well, you're not a very good member of the church because you're not wearing a white shirt, or you have a beard. Like, we don't have beards. Like, you must be clean shaven to be a good member of the church. You know, we have to break down those are wrong traditions to practice. So just my opinion.
Yep.
And that's hard. It's the traditions of our fathers, right? Like,
It is,
but I think
true.
I love about like the Book of Mormon is how it focuses a lot on culture and like how different kinds of beliefs can be ingrained to such a degree that like it can make you think you're like doing the right thing, but you're not. It can make you believe, I don't know. It's fascinating to me. And so I constantly think about that. Like, what traditions of our fathers are like really good and uplifting and inspiring and enlightening and like help uplift other people, and which traditions are like not helping us. Exactly. Right. And what can and we all have those within our own lives of like what kinds of things like aren't doing that for us, right? Aren't making us better people. Yeah.
I mean, I had a friend one time a while back. She asked if she could come to church. She wasn't a member of the church. And she's like, well, what do I wear? And I caught myself because I was like, well, you want to wear your Sunday best and like a dress. And I was like, Corey, you're not living what you say people should, you know, you're not living what you preach, Corey. So I said, wear what you want. You got nice jeans, a blouse, whatever you want to wear. And she showed up in bell-bottom jeans and a really nice blouse. And then she showed up to church. I'm like, welcome. And nobody said a word. Everybody was welcoming. Nobody looked at her weird. They didn't treat her weird. It was really awesome. But for a split second, I'm like, oh, you probably should wear a dress. And I was like, Corey, like, you don't have to wear a dress to come to church, especially if you're not a member of the church. So I think we just have to practice that ourselves. And I think that's uplifting. It's uplifting for the person who visited for the first time. They felt that it was a uplifting experience because they didn't feel like they walked away going, oh, everybody was staring at my pants, or they were staring at my blue jeans or something.
But we need to make sure we're still dressing up for church too.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Because I was
But-
going to say, if you go to church in jeans and a t-shirt, because that's the best you've got, great.
Well, sometimes I'm traveling. Like sometimes I'm traveling and work extended me through the weekend. They said, hey, I need you to stay till Monday. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm here for Sunday. I might as well just pop into church. But all I have is cargo pants and a polo shirt. So I show up with a polo shirt and cargo pants.
Yeah.
Because what's worse? Like, oh, I can't go today because I don't have a suit. Well, I still go.
Right. But if you're wearing
dress how you can.
if you're wearing cargo pants and a shirt every day just because it's too much hassle to dress up, are you really? And like I said, I'm just talking to myself here. Am I really
going back to uplifting? Like
the respect? Am I showing the Savior the respect that he deserves if I'm not wearing my best to see him, but I'll turn around and wear my best to see a judge?
Yeah, I think it's better that you go to church and not worry about like how you're dressed. And you just, if you show up, you say, hey guys, I'm here over town. I'm here on business and I wasn't expecting to be here this weekend, but hey, I'm glad I'm here this Sunday. And then they'll get it. They're like, oh, Corey didn't have a suit. You know, he's expecting to be back home for church, but didn't happen. So,
Yep.
Well, and it's one of those things too that like how we show respect in our dress is something that can vary a lot for people of different cultures, different means, and even within like the US, we have lots of different cultures, right? And so sometimes like it just isn't quite as simple as we'd want it to be, right? I don't know, it just makes me think back to like the whole like wear pants to church stuff, which where I lived, it was like no big deal, right? But there were certain places in the church where people were like, women should not be wearing pants to church. And I was like, I don't know. I see women who look stellar in their pantsuits,
Yeah.
right? Going to church and look super dressed up.
yep.
And I don't think anything is wrong with that, right? But I think there's just lots of things, I don't know, where we just kind of don't know all of the circumstances.
But we know the
we just shouldn't judge, right?
right. But we know the circumstances when we look in our closet.
Yeah, we know our own relationship, right? Like our own relationship with God, how we feel when we dress, whether we feel like we're being respectful, like that for sure. Like that's within our responsibility.
Yeah, I think
Of
uplifting
ourselves.
others, like Monica said, I think it's how you treat them. So if we have a brother, I think for me, I want to feel inspired to uplift somebody. So hold on, I got a cough.
Bless
Sorry,
you.
I'm getting over a cold. So I like to be inspired to like just send a note. Like sometimes I just send a text message to somebody. I don't know why I'm sending it, but I'll just send it and say something like, hey, I hope you're doing well. I was thinking about you, and then send. And 9 times out of 10, people will text back going, man, I really needed that today.
Uh-huh.
And so that's what I feel when I want to uplift others is I just want them to know that they're in my thoughts, that they're not alone in this world. And that this random text going to fly out from me going, hey, I hope you're doing well. You know, I do that with my boys. I do that with some of my coworkers. You know, I'll just do that with, with my subordinates. You know, I'll text them like, hey, I hope you're having a good day today. You're doing a good job. Just wanted to know you're doing a good job. And I've done that with just a few, just randomly out of the blue. And I've gotten like these like heartfelt, quick messages back going, thanks, boss. I really needed that today or something. It's you just don't know what you can do to uplift others. You
Oh,
just
there was
gotta be willing to receive the message to do it.
There's
yeah,
a
for
poster
sure.
that my daughter had on her wall, and it said, "There's nothing negative about a positive thought, so share it." And we try to do that. You know, if you have a positive thought about somebody, for crying out loud, tell them. You know, I think that sometimes we get nervous, or we think that they're going to think we're flirting or needy or whatever. You know, but a lot of times someone will cross our minds, and we just let it go instead of just reaching out and saying exactly what we were thinking, especially if it's positive. And that's too bad. You know, I think that we all need to hear those things about ourselves. And you know, I love that. I love that quote.
Well, especially given like how much more like it takes so much more to ingrain positive like statements to other people. Like I think it's what, like 3 positive statements to 1 negative one
Mhm.
in terms. So like you say one negative thing to somebody, or somebody hears one negative thing in the day, right? Like to really kind of overcome some of that, there should be like 3 positive comments. And the thing is people just aren't getting it, right? Like people aren't being told that they're amazing, or that they're fun, or that they have a great laugh, or that they have a great smile, or that, you know, any of this stuff like on a regular basis, or that they're doing a good job, or that they're working hard, or that you appreciate their efforts. Or now something I do a lot too is I always try to return to people, like when we've had talks about ways to improve. Like sometimes I'll, you know, have a talk with a friend and I'll be like, hey, like this behavior is really affecting me, or it's affecting other people. Like, what can we do with it? And making sure to go back and be like, man, I really noticed that you've like worked really hard on this over the last like several months. And like, thank you. Like, this is amazing. Like, it's really hard work and a lot of people don't do it. And like, thanks for trying to be better. Like, thanks for trying to be a better human, right? Like, a lot of times we don't go back after giving like hard feedback to somebody who we care about, and appreciate the efforts that they're putting in, or recognizing where they are. And that's really important too.
Well, and kindness does increase productivity. I mean, I've proven
For
that at my
sure.
job a million times. The kinder I am to my employees, and the more understanding and welcoming I am with them, the more their productivity goes up. I've gone through my phases where I've yelled and thrown things and been mad too, and then they're just scared and hiding, and nobody's doing anything, you know. So, you know, productivity, if you want that to increase your kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
For sure.
People don't leave jobs, they leave employers.
Yes, definitely.
Yep.
I actually told my boss one day, we were talking about, I had told him I wanted a raise. And he says, so we had a meeting and we were talking, I says, you know what? So, you know, though, this isn't about money. It's about feeling valued. Because if you pay me $100 an hour and you don't value me, I guarantee you I'm not going to be here very long.
Yeah.
That being said, we do have to make a living. So part of the way you show me the value is by paying me. But
Yeah.
we're not going to do stuff that we hate for any amount of money.
And it could completely change the culture of like an entire company, like who's in charge, how the culture is set up. I work for a company that I just love, because there's clearly so much emphasis on like taking care of employees, on like becoming better as a company and as individuals within the company. Yeah, jerks don't last long in that company, right? Like it's just a really, it's an interesting thing. But yeah, I agree. Kindness goes a long way, Tara, for sure.
Yeah, I think the hard part too is I might be good at doing all those other things to other people, but part of the other discussion topic was like the tear downing of doing it to ourselves. Like, I mean, I think I'm pretty good at not tearing down others. It's just not in my nature. I don't feel good about that. It doesn't make me happy to tear down people. So, but I tell you what's really easy to do is tear down myself. And it's really hard to try to uplift myself. And I think we can all relate to that, all of us. I mean, we're always hard on ourselves. We're
Yep.
always so forgiving to others and less forgiving on ourselves.
But you need to quit tearing down yourself, because I don't let people tear down my friends. So if you tear down yourself, you're tearing down my friend. You need to quit.
Yeah, that's something that I do a lot, is like I think about it in terms of like, would I, like if some friend came to me and told me the kinds of things that like I'm struggling with or whatever, like what would I say to that friend? Like how would I encourage that friend? Would I be like, oh, you dunce? Like no, right? Like I would be like really empathetic and caring and loving and understanding. Like I think sometimes it's easy to just be like, okay, well, like what would I say if this was my child or like my friend or someone, and if it wasn't me? And I know for me that helps me to get like in a better headspace about like, oh yeah, I deserve to be kind like that to myself as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's the negative self-talk that I think that's the tearing down. I think you have to be careful that all of us have to be careful about negative self-talk. So it's very easy to do. I mean, you make a mistake and you're like, oh, bonehead, can't believe you did that, and then you start down that path of you're already self-talking like bonehead, dummy, can't believe you did that, what's wrong with you? And so, it's really hard not to have that negative talk.
Well, and we know all of our own downfalls and all of our own mistakes. We don't know that, with others. And we kind of hoard them, so every day it needs to just kind of be a fresh start to clear that stuff out so that you can learn to like yourself. But we know, we know our own downfalls. And I think that that's what does it. We don't know everybody else's, but we know our own. So.
Sometimes, right? Sometimes we know our own. Sometimes we might not, but I don't know, but there's like a huge opportunity in that too. Like I remember talking to somebody once about charity and just talking about how like, I find that there's so much more opportunity to practice real charity with the people who are closest to us, because we do know them so well, because all the ways in which like maybe they don't deserve it, maybe all the ways in which they screw up, the ways in which they're unkind, the times when they falter, and knowing them as well as you do, you still have this opportunity to show them mercy and be really kind and loving, right? And it's the same with yourself. I mean, depending on how well you know yourself, I guess, right? But
the real charity also comes from the strangers. The purer charity comes from strangers. If I'm driving through the canyon and I come across a car sitting one northbound and one southbound with flat tire, and my cousin, brother, buddy, whatever that I know, member from the ward that I know is sitting in one car and a complete stranger is sitting in the other car, they both have the same problem. There's a certain level of expectation to help the one you know. So the truest charity is coming from helping the one that you don't know anything about.
I would say, I don't know if it's truer. I would just say it's a different type, right? For me, it's easier sometimes to help the people who I don't know anything about and to just be like, I can treat you as a child of God, than the people where I know how like destructive they've been, right, in the lives of others. And that I think that can be really hard. So I think it's just different. It's two different types, right, of charity. And I think you should help like both. So Heidi was like, why wouldn't you just help both? I think you should, right?
First.
But it's like it's a hard thing, I think, when you have a full version, like a full view of someone and who they are, especially if that person has been like destructive or hateful or really had some negative impact on people around them, to still be merciful to them and forgiving, right?
I think that's probably the hardest commandment there is to, to love those that hurt you. We all have excuses for the people that we don't love, and usually they've done horrible things to us. But to grow love for those that have hurt us, I think that's a big one, a really big one.
Well, it all depends on how you look at it too, because for me, I look at it as I still love my ex-wife, but I love her as a daughter of Zion. I know she struggles. I know she's trying. I'm happy for her when she's getting remarried. I'm happy for her for that. I hope it works out. I hope that she's gotten better. I hear that you can get better over time as you get older. It gets better. And I wish her the best. I really do. I mean, it took me a long time to forgive. But I did forgive it. And there was always that, well, you could forgive, but it doesn't mean you have to be friends with them. But it's not that I'm friends with my ex. It's just that if she asks me for help or she asks me for advice, I help her and I give her advice, because she's still a daughter of Zion. She's still Heavenly Father's child. And I was married to her for 22 years. She's not an evil person, but I get what you're saying, Tara. It's really hard when people offend you and hurt you. It's really complicated. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, my ex had an affair with the husband of a couple's friendship of ours. So, and we were all members of the church, and that guy. So I was, I'm still kind of was friends with with the wife. I just kind of, kind of knew the wife. I knew she was going through a tough time. She stayed with him, with the guy. And then he got killed in a car accident a couple years ago. And she had called me and said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe, so-and-so is dead. He just died." And I felt so bad for her. And she asked if I'd come to the funeral. And I thought, boy, I'm going to go to the funeral of the guy who, had an affair with my wife. But I didn't look at it that way. I looked at it as I'm going for her because she's broken and she's hurt. And so I went, and it was a weird experience. But after I went and heard all the people speaking at the funeral, I got to see how his life was recently. Like after he went through the repentance process, after he, got his life back on track, and hear all the things that he was doing after that. The Spirit touched me, and I was like, okay, I can let that pain go. I can let that betrayal go. And I saw him as Heavenly Father saw him. And it was a weird experience, but it changed me. And it actually healed me, if that makes any sense. To go to that funeral was a really interesting experience.
Yeah, I think too, their experiences, like that's a really beautiful one. I think there are times where like forgiveness doesn't have to come even because someone's like changed, right? Like forgiveness is so much more about like what we hold and harbor in our own soul. And maybe they never apologize. Maybe they never change. Maybe they never get to the point that you hope that they're going to be. But being able to feel peace and care for them, that divine care and love that Heavenly Father has for them anyway, like is just such a, I don't know, it's such a powerful mode of forgiveness, right? Because it's really not about them. Like in the end, forgiveness isn't about them.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, it's tough.
What were you gonna
Forgiveness
say,
is
Steve?
about you. It's about what's going on in you.
Mm-hmm.
That's also part of why I left Iowa, because I knew when I got divorced, if I stayed out there, she'd have called me up and says, "Oh, hey, I need help with this. I need help with that. I need help with the other." And I'd have been right over there to help. And that wouldn't be fair to me. That wouldn't be fair to her.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to, I mean, there's a reason why the Lord had said, you have to forgive. Like, you have to forgive everyone. Like, he didn't say you could be choosy. And he knew that it wasn't for the benefit of the person who you're supposed to forgive. The benefit is you. Like, it is really you that benefits from forgiveness of those who offend you. Because it can be such a cancerous thing that eats you alive. If you hold those grudges, those angers, those, oh, I can't believe I got cheated on, and it eats you alive, and you're not happy, and whatever comes out of you is not happy, and you're just a miserable person over time.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
something that tears you
people like that.
down, right?
You know
Like
people like that.
it's something that tears you down.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think people don't even realize that they're doing it to themselves, that they're tearing themselves down in that way. Like it can be tough, or we want there to be like some reconciliation or some reason, some reason that we can give of like, oh, well, they're better now, or they've changed, or there's something that like kind of where they deserve some sort of forgiveness. But it's not about that. It's about you cleaning out that poison out of your own heart, right?
And most of the time, they don't even know where you're at there.
Exactly.
They've already moved. So it's like, it's one of those poisons that it's actually the worst type of cancer, if you want to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, it ruins your soul is what it does. It's a cancer that hits your soul, and you could become a bitter, jaded person, and it just keeps getting worse and worse over time. And and I saw when it first was going through the pain and the anger and the whole like process, I remember getting on my knees, and it was the first time when I was getting on my knees asking for help to get through it that I actually realized, like in that moment, I'm like, wait a minute. The Savior suffered all things. I said, he knows what I'm going through. Like, he suffered he knows what it feels like to get cheated on. He knows what it feels like to get betrayed. He knows what it feels like to go through a divorce. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I asked if he would let the atonement take my pain away. And over time, in a short time, it was actually happening. I was feeling better. I was feeling more forgiving. It still hurt, but it was going away, and I was processing it a lot faster. I could have gone the other direction where I was just like, oh, I'm kicking things around the house and being angry. And, and if I wasn't a member of the church, maybe I used to go out to the bar and start drinking, whatever it is. You can go in a destructive manner if you don't know how to use the atonement and try to overcome, that pain. But it could really destroy people. It's amazing.
Well, and there's also like, I really love the example of Christ saying, like, forgive them for they know not what they do, because I think that's really true for most people. Like, I think most people have some understanding of their actions, but they really don't understand what it's doing to the other person, right? Like, what it's doing to their heart or their soul, like what's happening internally in that other person, even if they know they're hurting them, like they don't know exactly how. And sometimes they don't even know they're hurting them, right?
Yeah.
And I've thought about that a lot too, in terms of like, man, I feel like a lot of times I can forgive and just be like, they don't get it. Like, they don't understand the pain that this is causing. Go ahead,
Exactly.
Steve. You were going to say something.
I was going to say two things, actually. One of them is the fact that goes back to the part that we're sitting there stewing on what so-and-so did. They didn't even realize they did it.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend that he had a restaurant, a drive-through. He was open till 1:00 in the morning on a Wednesday morning because Preston High School was coming back from state basketball playoffs. So he was open for people to get back into town. A week later, I went over there on a Friday at like 11 on my way back from West Side State playoffs, and he was closed. I used to go there 2 or 3 times a day just because I was living alone. I was out of school. I had money, and it was easier than cooking. So I'd go there a couple times a day and 2 or 3 days a week. And all of a sudden I just quit going. It's like, you know what, if you're going to do that, I'll take my business somewhere else. I bumped into him about a month and a half later, and he says, I haven't seen you in this restaurant lately. What happened? And I told him, and he hadn't even realized that, he goes, I didn't even realize that they were having their state playoffs. I'd have definitely stayed open if I'd have known, if I had thought about it. And I'm sure he had seen it and it slipped his mind. So it was an innocent mistake.
Yeah, it's perspective. It's how you set your mind. If you can set your mind in the right way, you won't make those mistakes, right?
Yep. The other thing I was going to say that's going to scare people, the Savior covers both sides of that.
Mm-hmm.
With the atonement. He covers your pain from getting hurt, and he also covers her pain from hurting you.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's all perspective, right? I mean, I think for me, when I'm driving in the road and I feel offended by a driver, I really have to focus on my mind and say, okay, I don't know what that person is going through. I don't know if they're trying to get to the hospital, if they finally got a job interview and they're desperate to get a new job and they're trying to make it on time, or they're just not a very good driver and they're doing the best they can. But here I am wanting to just, pump my fist out the window and be angry. And it's all about a mind focus. So if I can focus on that, I was telling my boys that when I was visiting in Utah, because my son was getting frustrated while we were driving somewhere. And I said, son, you don't know what's going on with that guy. Look, he's got a work truck. You don't know what he's going through. You don't know if he's trying to get to the job site so he can get the bid because he's got to feed his family and times are tough right now. And you don't know why he's driving that way. So I said, have a different mental perspective.
That's why
he was like, yeah, Dad, I never thought of it that way. I said, you're only thinking about yourself and how this guy made you mad.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different. Once you start to change your focus and your mental picture, life is actually happier. Like I drive happier. I let things go. I get cut off, whatever.
Yeah. I'm actually like really excited. I probably brought this up in another podcast. I'm really excited to read that book, like What Happened to You, just as a way of like seeing, like understanding people and kind of where they are in life and why they make the decisions they do from the perspective of like what has happened to them in life, right? I'm not saying that like there's some, foreordained thing that they have to be that way because of stuff that happened, but just having like a perspective of most people don't become like jerks, right?
No.
Without going through crappy stuff, like, and so just kind of thinking like, okay, well, what happened in your life? Like, what's the context that kind of led you down this path or that path or led you to this decision, as just a way of understanding people better. It's
Yep.
called What Happened to You is the name of the book. People are asking in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, it's really if you want to be uplifting to others, it's a mental perspective. And I think we've talked about some of those tips here. Monica mentioned some really, really good ones, and I kind of piggybacked on some of her thought processes. But I think it's having that mental process and having a plan ahead of time. Like, how are you going to react to situations when they present themselves? Are you going to react with anger, with self-centeredness? Or is it going to be, something that it's outwardly, it's like, well, I don't know that person's situation. Maybe they're driving their wife, her wife's having a baby and he's driving his wife to work, and that's why he's driving erratically. And where are you going to honk and, pump your fist at him? So, I mean, it's just let it go. It's, you don't know what's going on in those people's lives,
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Steve. I wonder what you think about this, because it was something I just actually had just thought about during the podcast and this discussion, but I hadn't really thought about it this way before. But I was like, man, I feel like, apologizing is also like a key part of uplifting people, like reconciling ourselves to other people when we wrong them, right? Because I think sometimes we talk about like making sure that we're making choices not to be offended, but I don't know. I wonder what you and others in the group think about that, as like one way to uplift people is to be accountable and to own our mistakes and to recognize, like to see them and see the pain that they're going through because of choices we make.
Definitely be accountable. Definitely apologize if you're wrong, but only when you mean it.
For sure. Yeah.
Because
only when it's sincere.
Get after me because my kids, well, he needs to apologize. Yes, he does apologize when he's ready. And I've told my kids, you don't ever apologize that you don't mean it, because it's a lot more than just words. It's easy to say sorry. It's not near as easy to mean I'm sorry. And if your words are empty, then what do you have?
Yeah,
that's true. I think let's open it up to the audience. If you want to jump on and ask a question, or if you want to give us your thoughts on how you uplift others, how do you avoid tearing down people? So raise your hand. I don't know if you guys know how to do it. You can do it through your reaction buttons. You can do it on your keyboard. I think it's like Control Y, or is it Alt Y?
If you're on your phone, it's usually you can just put it down. There's usually like a little pop-up that can come down at the bottom when you
so you can do like
more,
Alt Y,
and it'll show up.
If you're on Windows, and it's, I think it's Option Y if it's on a Mac. But go ahead and raise your hand if you want to come in and join the discussion. And
look, I raised it with Alt Y.
Oh, okay, wow, nice. See?
It works. It works.
It works, people. So, or we can read questions that come in if people don't want to come on board and talk, then, we can read your questions in the chat. So
looks like Nick's got his hand up.
Yep.
Let's see.
Okay, I asked him to unmute, so he'll have to.
Okay.
Hey, how you doing? Sorry.
No, you're
I'm
good.
in the airport. I think one thing to uplift others is first love yourself, and then second is I like to bring like treats over to people or thoughtful things or help people in need of help. Serving others helps me uplift people.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Me uplift myself.
Yeah.
I found that the best way for my problems to go away is when I start helping somebody else with their problems.
Serve others. Yeah.
Otherwise, I start dwelling on my problems, and then I get bogged down.
And it's a
It kind of gets
huge,
into that whole self-love thing that's so popular right now. You know, everybody talks about, you know, make sure that you pamper yourself, spend time on yourself. But I have found that doing something for somebody else is way more pampering to me than a pedicure. You know, I mean, that's just how it is. Like if you reach out and love others and serve others, that's, to me, that's where happiness truly is, you know, way more than spoiling myself.
Yep.
yeah. I think self-care can look lots of different ways. Like, I think it's important to have bandwidth, right? Like when we read the story of like the 10 virgins, or we, you know, we think about these analogies of like the well and running out, like making sure that your own well is full, making sure that your own oil lamp is full. That's important when it comes to service, right? Because we can burn out, like we can burn ourselves out. We can say yes to too many things. We can miss things that might be important. I don't know if you guys remember that video of the that the church put out, but it was like the woman who was like doing all of this stuff all day long and then didn't go to meet like her friend or her sister or whatever at the airport because she like ran out of time. But it was one of those things where I was watching the video and I was like, oh, I feel like this could be done in different ways, because like she forgot that she was gonna like had to cook dinner for somebody. So she started cooking dinner. I was like, why don't you just order dinner at that point, right? Like you could still do the service, just order some food, like take her some food or like have it delivered, or like that there were so many other ways to solve the problems. But at the end, she's like really sad and upset that she didn't. And I was like, who knows, maybe like her sister or her friend really needed to see her that day, right? But she just kept saying yes and yes and yes and yes, and kind of not thinking about other ways to do it. So I think we also need to be judicious, right? With with our time and energy, and know that there's plenty of it to give, but you can run out if you're not careful.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So what do you do? What do you do, Tara? Like, what is your favorite thing to do for like uplifting others? Like, what do you like to do?
Me? Oh gosh, I don't know. I think it honestly just goes back to, you know, it's a new habit that I've tried to get into and I love it. And that's really just telling people that they mean something to me when they mean something to me. You know, I used to not do that. I used to just have cool thoughts about people, but I would feel self-conscious about like, well, would they want to be my friend? Would they want to, yeah, I would just always think that they would think I had different, I don't know, that I was asking for different reasons. And what I found is it's not like that. You know, I really do. Big proponent of saying what you mean and being kind to people. It's a habit that you really need to get into. It's awesome. So, and people love it.
Yeah, it's true. So let's see, do we have any other questions? Have you been scanning the chats to see if we have any questions in the chats?
I've been scanning the chat, but I didn't see anything come up.
We must
Anybody
be
else have
thoroughly covering it.
questions? Or like everybody's like, okay, we've got everything. We know everything now about
Yeah,
uplifting
it's
people
all covered. You know,
and
you guys
not
covered
tearing
it
people
well.
down, and we're
We're wearing blue
good.
jeans to church and not going to make fun of people.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
we were talking about how, you know, forgive them for they know not what they do. And Steve will like this. Anybody who's ever been in farming will love this. Like if you're in farming or agriculture at all, your life is nothing but one big session of building a fence. That's how I feel like that's all we ever do is build the freaking fence. And, you know, I was just there last week building a fence again. But I had some friends who know how much I hate to build fence, and they came and they built the fence, right? But they did it wrong, and the calves pressed up against it, and it fell over, and the calves all ran away. And my grandpa was furious, and it was tempting to just be disgusted with him in a way. I don't know how to explain it, but like we appreciated the effort, but you know, all of our cows were gone. And I think that goes back to forgiveness, understanding, all of it. You know, there are a lot of people who reach out to you and try to do kind things without really knowing exactly what you need. And we need to offer some grace for that. You know, there are a lot of people who've tried to do nice things for me, even not really knowing who I am, and things that I would really actually get freaked out over. And I think that we need to give people a little bit of grace when they try. You know, anybody who tries to help you, I think deserves a little bit of recognition and appreciation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes we can be judicious about like what we can offer, like what we're actually good at. Like, do we know how to build a fence, or would it be better for us to like maybe go find somebody else who has more knowledge and say, hey, is this something that like I could pay you to help out on, or, you know, would you be able to help out on this project? Because I think that's hard. I think I agree with you, Tara. I think we need to give people grace. And I think just in our own individual lives, we can be really, you know, we can think hard about what kinds of service we can actually offer at any given time and what we're good at.
Right.
Yeah. So we have Steph in here. How's it going?
Yep.
Steven, but
Or is it Steven,
nobody
right?
on that one. Yeah.
Your parents should learn how to. I said your parents. Philip, he said Stefan. Apparently,
At least he didn't say it, Stefan. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, Steven, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
One thought that's been stirring around in my brain for a moment is forgive yourself, for you know not what you do.
Yeah, that's true. That's the hardest part. That's the hardest part for me, is I could be so easily forgiving others, and you know, but I'm so hard on myself. That's the hardest part to fight. You know, you're like, oh yeah, the Lord forgives everybody but me.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody else is so much more perfect than me. I suck. You know,
Yeah.
you get that, you start falling down that rabbit hole. It's not a good place to go.
Or sometimes like, well, the Lord probably expects more of me, right, than of other people, which is also in some ways like a way of kind of leveling ourselves out to other people in different hierarchies, right? It's tricky.
Exactly.
Tricky and dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, comparing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. That was awesome.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
No problem.
Oops. Sorry, go ahead and unmute yourself. You can keep talking.
I was just saying thanks. That's all. I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us tonight.
Sweet.
No
All right. So we got Nick.
Oh, sorry. I just got one more thing. And I know
Sure.
the mask looks horrible. But you know, following the Spirit is an important one too, because I think the Spirit can give us guidance in who to help, you know, who to touch that day or who we can uplift, right? And I've seen it in my life where in my ward, they've done a really good job, you know, including me in activities, stopping by, you know, just patting me on the back, right? Like someone today patted me on the back, and it meant the world to me. So
Yeah, that's true.
it's even that the little stuff, right? It's not just it's the little stuff counts too. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, I think telling somebody at church, it was good to see them at church. Like, it was good to see you today. I was glad to see you today. Or, you know, I was thinking about you all week, and I'm glad I saw you here today at church, because I just wanted to come by and see how you're doing and shake your hand. I mean, you could be genuine, and that's all genuine. And that's just, sometimes that's all people need to hear is like, really? Because I come to church and feel like the only person here and nobody cares about me. And you just said hi to me, and you're glad I'm here, and you're glad to see me. Those are just little things that, you know.
Okay, so when you go to church, where do you sit?
Where do I sit?
Yep.
Well, yeah.
It depends.
I have to sit in the back.
It depends. I sit with like, it depends on like, well, and now I'm in a new ward as of this week, but I think it depends for me. Like, Sometimes I'll sit with a friend who maybe their spouse is on the stand or something and they need extra help with their kids, or sometimes I'll sit by somebody who's new, right? And learning things, or someone I don't know who's sitting by themselves. Sometimes I sit with friends I know really well. I think it just like depends on the week and the circumstances and um, you know, what kind of strikes me that day.
Well, I say that because if I walk in and I sneak in the back and sit in the back corner and then wonder why nobody notices me, it's kind of my own fault too. So,
Oh, yeah. Well, I sit by the entrance. So our ward's kind of different here in Virginia. So it's like an old fashioned church. Like the back doors are the doors to the chapel, and
Right.
that's where the back seating starts, and then you funnel up to the front. So I sit in the back row. The bishops asked me to sit back there for security reasons.
what part of Virginia?
I'm in Alexandria.
Oh, I see.
So, but yeah, I sit more, more for security to sit back in that corner. But I do see everybody who comes in, and I see everybody who's, leaving with their kids to take them to the cry room, But I do see people when they're sitting out in the lobby just before those two doors, those double doors. And so a lot of times I'll go out and I'll just greet people who are sitting out there, because I don't know if they're sitting out there because they don't feel worthy to come in, or they don't feel welcome, or they're shy. And so I usually will kind of walk out there and be like, hi, how you doing? I haven't seen you here before. And I'll try to just say, hey, I'm glad, welcome to the ward. Especially if I've never seen him before, I always want to say hi to somebody, because I don't know if you've ever been somewhere and you walk in and there's like 150 or 200 people and not one person said hi to you. Doesn't that feel weird?
Yeah,
for sure.
You're like,
I
what's
also
going
think
on?
I think that also one of the most compassionate things you can do for somebody is to need them. And I know that sounds weird, but I am the kind of person who if I was inactive, I could easily be inactive. I could go hang out every Sunday on a horse and I would be fine. But at church, there's the bishop's wife has 1 million kids, and I go and I sit next to her and I help her with her kids. And I love them. They're awesome kids. But every time I think, well, do I really need to go today? My brain automatically goes to that. Well, she needs me. And even though I'm helping her needing me is one of the kindest things that she could ever do to increase my own activity. I think giving somebody a calling, a duty, something to do. I think that is actually a very compassionate, very kind to give people a way to contribute. I don't even know if that makes sense, but I think that just needing me was just a really kind thing for her to do. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also just I was thinking back to Nick just talking about listening to the Spirit, and I think I ended up taking a view in my life pretty early on that if I had a positive thought of something to do for someone else, that I was just going to act on it. That I was like, I don't know if this is a spirit or my own brain, but there's no bad thing can come from just doing something kind for someone. So if I have a thought to call a friend, or to say hi, or to ask someone to whatever little thought it might be, I act on it. And I just assume this is coming from the Spirit.
Sorry about that. I had to readjust my phone for a minute.
No, you're fine. People, and thinking about what Tara was saying, people can't serve unless people are willing to be served. Right? I love the stories of the Savior when he just is letting people serve him. I love that scene where he's letting, this woman anoint his feet and just care for him in this way that she wants to. It's really beautiful. It's not like he necessarily needed it, right? But just to let her do it for him. And I'm sure that it uplifted him, and it's cool.
Exactly. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I think we're going to start wrapping it up and go right over to the after party. So how's that sound for everybody there? Any more questions? We'll give you one last chance to raise your hand. But I think we had a really good discussion with you, Steve. I really appreciate you coming on board and